Joining us now, we're live in Richmond for a change. Patty Lyman with us. She is the Republican National Committee State Committee woman for Virginia. Patty, thank you. Joining us now is Democratic State Senator and leader of the Democrat State Senate from Fairfax, Scott Surovell. Senator Surovell, great to have you with us.
Hello. John, how you doing?
Yes,
good to be with you again.
I'm doing fine. Hey, the Virginia Star has, as you know, we have done our nominations for the Man of the Year person of the Year in Virginia. We had a top 10. You were in that. We narrowed it last night to a top 5. Published that. You're in that, and. The reason that I wanted to have you on today, Scott, and the reason that we have nominated you for this, it's because it's kind of people don't realize that any law now in Virginia has to go through the state Senate. It's divided. You guys stopped a lot of stuff that came out of the House, just killed it in your own committees. And if you really can't get the support of the Democrats in the state Senate, you're not going to get anything done. And you're basically leading that effort. You're number 2 in command, but everything is running through you. Right.
Number 3.
You're number 3, but you're 3 on paper, but you're the guy that carries everything, and we've flushed that out. That's why you're in the Man of the Year for Virginia, and actually have a chance to win that. Tell us, going into this General Assembly in 2021, starting in January. What are some of your priorities? That's number 1. And what is your vision for this session after we had this long special session? What's your vision?
Well, John, first of all, thanks for the nomination. Appreciate that. It's been a long year for a lot of reasons, and I think a lot of people are sort of emotionally drained by the pandemic, and our caucus was, and I think a lot of folks in the state were very affected by what happened after George Floyd's death, and that's why we focused on criminal justice reform in the special session. This session, we obviously the pandemic and the budget are probably the front and center issues. We still have a lot of economic uncertainty about what's going on with our state budget, our state revenues, where the economy's headed. We're waiting to see if we get another slug of cash from the federal government to help us patch some holes. Our local governments are really getting killed. And so I think the budget is probably going to, and the economy and the pandemic are probably going to be front and center. Beyond that, the governor has indicated that he wants us to try to get, to put marijuana, he's put marijuana legalization on the table. I think that's going to be complicated. I'm hoping we can get that done. I personally think it's a good idea. I think most of my caucus thinks it's a good idea, but it's a really big, complex, complicated issue, and trying to bang that out in 45 days is going to be tricky. We have a few things to clean up from the special session. For example, expungement reform. Virginia has one of the most restrictive laws when it comes to trying to get convictions off your record. If you've led a good life after a period of time, in 41 other states, you can get a misdemeanor conviction purged, but in Virginia you can't. So we're going to be looking at that. Beyond that, John, I know we're going to take a look at the death penalty. That's something that we talked about last session, but with so much going on, we pushed off. I know a lot of people want to talk about schools and focusing on schools and what's going on with the pandemic in schools. I suspect that's going to be a topic of discussion. But we've really been subsumed by the pandemic and how to respond to it. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest. That and the budget are going to be the 2 biggest focuses.
So one thing I want to ask, and I want to compliment the state Senate on in Virginia, and of course it's the Democrats control it. You guys decided to keep meeting in person at, I think, the Science Museum, and where the House is not, they're still doing Zoom and nobody can come in. You're allowing media into your sessions in the Science Museum in Richmond. We've already got our star reporters lined up for that. I just want to commend you on that, because we can't get to the people in the House. There's They're not meeting. They're Zooming. By the way, they're taking a per diem. Just FYI. But what led to the decision in the state Senate in Virginia to hold your meetings publicly and allow the media and other people access to that?
Well, there's a couple of things that went into that, John. First of all, we're a smaller body, and it's easier for us to find space to meet in. With only 40 people and our clerk staff, we have more venue choices than they do. But I think also in our chamber, we feel like in order to legislate most effectively, it's important that we be able to stand up and be able to talk to each other, albeit distance. I mean, we're all wearing masks in there, but a lot of times you have to go off in a scrum in the corner while there's other things going on to try and figure something out, or in a recess or a break. And if you're scattered all over the state, you just can't have a whole bunch of Zoom rooms set up to go hop into,
Right.
You can't just go hop into somebody's room or text them and say, give me an invite into your room or what. It's just not very efficient. And so to really move bills along and legislate effectively, we felt like we needed to be at least around each other physically to be able to have conversations, and we just tend to be a much more collaborative body. We're much less top down in terms of how we run things. Personally, I also cared about the transparency factor. I agree that when press are on the floor, they can see what's happening, and they can see who's having conversations and what's going on a lot more easily. So that was part of it too, and we just feel like it's a more effective way to legislate. The speaker's really concerned about people's health, and we've had some members that have gotten COVID infections, not just in the House, but also in the Senate, but also in the House. And we're definitely being as safe as we can while we do it. I don't think anybody wants to be stupid, but we think it's possible to do it in person as long as we spread out.
Well, I think you guys made the right decision just for that transparency. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're in Richmond today. Scott Surovell is with us. He is a Democratic state senator from Fairfax, number 3 in charge in the state Senate in his caucus. But the reason why we love having Scott on, if you understand the way it works, Virginia is now one-party government. The Democrats control every lever of government. All the executive branch, they have a 5-6 seat majority in the House, and they also have a 1-seat majority in the Senate. But it's the Senate in Virginia that's been the backstop to a lot of the crazy stuff that's come out of this super progressive wing. And what Scott is able, you can't get anything passed with it without going through Scott Surovell. I mean, this is just reality.
That's not true.
It's just reality. And so you can't get it passed. And what Surovell does is he's got to bridge the gap between, Patty, the progressives that he's dealing with on the House side and some of his own members, Adam Ebbin and others, some of the progressives, and he's got to bridge that gap with a 1-seat majority and 2, let's call them 2.5 moderates in his party, Craig Deeds being half a moderate, Morrissey, swing vote, Democrat, and Chap Peterson, who's voting no on marijuana. So Surovell's the guy that bridges that gap. So you really can't get anything done without him. And he's got a very sensitive thing because he's got to put the moderate and the liberal factions together to get anything passed. And if you don't get Morrissey and you don't get Peterson and you don't get Deeds, it gets killed in committee. So that's basically what happens. And Scott, I know you're in a sensitive position because you got Dick Sazzle the majority, but that's basically the way it works.
John, I appreciate your confidence. It's not quite like that, but
yes, it is. It's totally that.
It takes one member. If one member peels off, we're in a tie vote situation.
Yeah, but you're the guy that Sazzle goes to, and if you can't get that, it dies in committee, and there's no controversy. That's why we nominated you for Virginia Person of the Year, because people understand you're basically running the government. That's just reality. Patty, go ahead.
Senator Surovell, it's Patty Lyman. Happy to make your acquaintance, at least on the air. Chap Peterson is my state senator. First, I checked to see if you were, but he actually is. I love that John asked you about and complimented the Senate on having some common sense and meeting in person so you can do the work of the people in an effective way and still be safe. You all get it. You all understand what precautions are necessary and which ones perhaps aren't. I would like to challenge you and those of you that have sense in the Senate to push back on your governor, who has imposed absolutely draconian restrictions on the people and families in Virginia. People are suffering pain like they've never suffered before, and frankly, a lot of these restrictions that Governor Northam has put on are completely political and absolutely unnecessary, in my personal opinion. I know that you can't say that, but y'all have the sense to do things properly and reasonably in the state Senate. I'd love to see you push back on some of the governor's extreme measures.
And nice to meet you also. You know, I've had many constituents reach out to me, both on social media, otherwise, with concern about some of the restrictions. And personally, I think the governor's been prudent. I think we're lucky to have a doctor at the head of our government, unlike any other state in the country. And it's very hard for the legislature to play a role in this situation because, the way our system works, our laws typically are not valid until, at least in this session, they won't be valid till July 1 unless we get an emergency clause on something. And so, by the time our laws are in effect, the reality has changed on the ground, and that's why the governor has the powers that he does. And we obviously, we can lobby the governor. We have, a bully pulpit. We can make noise and ask for things, and sometimes that has an effect. Sometimes it doesn't. But if you look at what's happening in other states, I think Virginia is looking pretty good right now in terms of where we are in terms of our hospital admissions and ICUs and deaths. I mean, we're probably, I think, around the middle. We're not where California is, where they're have morgues set up outside and waits to get into emergency rooms. So it's it's an unprecedented situation. I mean,
no, wait a minute, Senator. There's not a single hospital in Virginia, or quite frankly, America, that has been overrun by COVID. So that's just a misnomer that the fearmongers put out to get mail-in ballots so they can steal.
I don't know, John. I saw on the national news last night. I saw that in some hospitals in California that when you get brought in the ambulance, there's like a 2 or 3 hour wait to get into the emergency room because it's packed. And so I just had a client I spoke to yesterday who was in a car accident in Virginia about a week ago, and she told me they had to put her in a cot in the hallway because the emergency room was full for the first 2 hours she got there, and they eventually got her in, but and she wasn't in a situation where she needed immediate attention. She'd been in a car accident, had a broken wrist and a broken sternum, but it's the ERs are pretty. They're not. I don't think anybody's dying or anything because they're not getting into room, but the hospitals are getting pretty busy, and not in Virginia. It's not so bad as it is in other states, but
when does the governor's dictatorial powers go away? I mean, whether it's Governor Northam or Governor Republican Amanda Chase, whoever it is, these emergency powers. When do you guys just vote on getting rid of those? Or did they just go on?
John,
did they go on in perpetuity? And did they, if Justin Fairfax is governor or Pete Snyder is governor, did they just transfer to that governor?
Well, John, I think the state of emergency laws that we have, I think, are premised. Most of the time, when you hear a state of emergency, you don't even think about it because it's declared either during a hurricane or a snowstorm,
right.
And it only lasts like a week or two, whatever, Right. And I think most when those laws were drafted, we were thinking about that. We hadn't had a pandemic since 1918, and so I don't think anybody was really thinking about that. So, I think once this is all over, we might take a look at whether we need different structure for a more ongoing situation like this. I mean, I'm not sure anybody thought we'd have a state of emergency that would last a year and a half or 2 years, but so I think that's part of the disconnect. I mean, I guarantee you, in 1918. We didn't have these kinds of, the laws weren't quite like this, mm-hmm. But things weren't as complicated back then either. Mm-hmm. So, but right now, the state of emergency goes on until he says it's over pretty much.
Okay, so this is just a technical question. One term, he's out, January, 2022? 22. Somebody else will put his hand on the Bible, take the governor's oath. Does the power transfer to that new individual?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Unbelievable. So basically, we're now in a state where governors control our life. Scott, I know you've got a libertarian streak. I know you don't like this government power. I know you. I mean, it's got to make you uncomfortable that it just goes on in perpetuity.
That's why I said, John, I think at some point we'll probably have a conversation about exactly, how the structure ought to be in a more long-term situation, and maybe there ought to be a role for the legislature at some point. But I don't think right now is the right time to be legislating about that. We need to be able to take a really long and hard look at it, because you never know what the next crisis is going to be. I mean, it might not be a pandemic. It could be some other, horrible natural disaster we haven't even thought about.
Well, then you would vote to give the governor that, you would give the governor that power for a week to have this go on in perpetuity, where he's deciding who can go to church. I mean, I'm Catholic. I couldn't go to midnight mass with my family this year, Christmas Eve mass, first time since I can remember 5, because we couldn't get in. You had to make reservations, and we couldn't get in. And I'm like, okay, I can go to Walmart where there's 9 million people, and Lowe's where there's 30,000 people in the parking lot, but I can't go to midnight mass because that's what the governor said. Well, who the hell is he? I mean, this is what's bothering people, Scott. It's just reality.